Hello everyone, and welcome to ForeFlight's first webinar for Canadian pilots. First of many, I hope, as we continue to use this platform to hopefully open up a new chapter in how we're able to reach out to our users and educate everyone on this amazing and great aviation tool that we all use. My name is Dominik Ochmanek. I am privileged to work on the pilot support team here at ForeFlight and specializing in Canadian content. I am a Class 3 instructor in the Greater Toronto area and currently hold a ATPL license. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be speaking and covering today. First, we're going to take a look at a little bit of information about the company itself. Then we're going to take a look at some conventional and maybe lesser known ways of planning a route, both VFR and IFR. Then we're going to take a look at how ForeFlight helps us stay ahead of the aircraft in flight by eliminating a lot of tasks that we would normally be doing with paper charts. We'll take a look at some post-flight tools that ForeFlight offers, as well as some tips and tricks to help you navigate through the app a little bit and utilize it a little bit more. Then we're going to take a look at what's new, and there's always something new at ForeFlight. The company was founded in 2007, and our co-founders still run the company today. The first ForeFlight was just a simple web application that consolidated aviation weather information from different online sources into a single dashboard. When the iPhone and iPad came out, well, that changed the scene completely. The evolution of ForeFlight really accelerated into what you see today. Primarily, our purpose is to create beautiful apps for pilots and flight operations that make planning and flying and record keeping a joy. We understand that ForeFlight has become a mission-critical app, and that's why we support our application with fanatical pilot support. That pilot support is something I'm privileged to be a part of, and we understand that if you're having an issue with your device or the application itself, that you'll need an answer right away. That's why we're available almost 24/7 to provide that support. I'd like to talk a little bit about the iPad. Now, whenever you're buying an iPad, you have the choice between physical size and internal memory as well. I just want to talk about what ForeFlight recommends. As far as physical size, well, that really depends on your own cockpit real estate. I personally fly with an iPad mini strapped to my knee or suction cup to the windshield, and that works pretty well in a Cessna 172, but you might want to accommodate for your aircraft. Each iPad is also sold in a Wi-Fi only and a Wi-Fi and cellular version. There are cost savings associated with the Wi-Fi only version. However, we strongly recommend buying the Wi-Fi and cellular version of an iPad because the Wi-Fi and cellular versions of the iPad have the GPS chip already included in them. That GPS is very strong and capable, very accurate, and you will not need to buy an external GPS source for your flying. As far as memory, internal storage memory, we recognize that you want to use your iPad for other things, not just for flight. So we recommend buying at least a 32 gigabyte in size. Pre-flight. The iPad has become like any other aircraft system. So add it to your pre-flight checklist to make sure the battery is charged, and if not, that you're carrying an external battery or have some ability to charge your iPad in the air. Check ForeFlight and iOS software updates. They are updated pretty frequently, so you should be aware that you're flying the most recent and current versions. Current charts and data. We'll talk a little bit about the pack feature later on, but you'll want to make sure that you're carrying the most current charts and data applicable to your flight. All right, with that out of the way, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of things, and let's plan a route. So planning a route, there's multiple ways to do this, and we find that most people drop down the navlog and tap inside that create a route box to start typing in their plans, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, but there is another way to do it, and kind of a more a smarter way. If you look at the top right-hand corner where you have the search box, you can actually type in your whole flight plan right in there, and it'll pre-populate it into your navlog. So let's see how to do that. Let's say we're doing a flight from Brampton CNC3 to Oshawa, CYOO. We can type our departure and destination airports right in there. And let's say we have another waypoint like North Bay. So we can put in our route. Next, we can put in our aircraft speed. So let's say we're touring 110 today, and we're burning about 8.4 gallons an hour, right? This is obviously based on your POH and your aircraft specifications. The altitude I like to fly today is 5,500 feet, and the registration is Charlie Golf, Charlie Echo Oscar. I can also put a departure time. Now we'll look into why the departure time is important, but the departure time will essentially take your winds aloft at that time. It won't take the current winds aloft. It'll look into the forecasts and give you a more accurate fuel burn and winds aloft information. If you're wondering what order this has to be in, whether true airspeed has to be first or gallons has to be always second, it actually doesn't matter. The search box is smart enough to recognize what's your altitude, what's your speed, what's your fuel burn, and or what's your time of departure. So you'll find that if you do different combinations, you'll still get the same result. And the result is this. You would get a fully planned route. You can see in the drop-down nav log there that you have your aircraft, you have your airspeed, fuel burn, and altitude you selected, and your route is also displayed as well. Estimated time of departure, and it's into the future, so 4:30. We have ForeFlight features something called a route advisor, and this is more an IFR pilot tip. If you were to drop down that nav log and you go to the top, just on the right-hand corner there, you can see you have a routes box. If you tap that route box, you will get a suggested airway for that route. Okay, and you'll also get recently filed flight plans as well. So or recently filed routes displayed there. Now, for this particular route, there is none, but it does suggest for you an airway, just like the back of the CFS suggests recommended routes. This is the same type of thing. So it will take your departure and your arrival airport into consideration. The final destination airport, I should say. In this case, it recognizes that you want to go from Brampton to North Bay, and so it's going to create a route based on that. If you have another airport in there, keep in mind you have to file 2 IFR flight plans for that, so it won't recognize that you want to go to both of those airports. It'll just treat Oshawa as a waypoint. So just something to keep in mind there. Along the same lines, ForeFlight has something called an altitude advisor. Now, I don't know if you've seen the altitude advisor, but it's available, again, in the drop-down menu under your altitude there. If you were to tap your altitude, you get a little pop-up box that says altitude advisor. Altitude advisor is great because it gives you VFR and IFR altitudes, both westerly and easterly. So you'll have evens or odds, or plus 500 if it's a VFR route. It'll break down the headwind or tailwind component that you're getting at a particular altitude. It will give you your time en route based on different altitudes, and it'll also give you your fuel burns. So it's a nice, quick, and easy way to tell yourself, okay, I was planning to go at 5,500 feet today, but maybe 7,500 is a little more economical, or maybe it's not. In this case, you're getting a bit more of a headwind, and a longer time en route, bigger fuel burn. Maybe it's not worth it to go up to that 7,500 unless you need to. The great thing about ForeFlight is that if you were to set up a flight plan on one device, it will sync across your devices. So if you have ForeFlight both on your iPad mini and on your iPad Pro and on your phone, it will sync all those devices it will sync that route to your other devices. So there's no reason to go into your iPad afterwards, your backup iPad, and do the same thing. As long as they're all connected to some kind of a network, you will have your routes and flight plans synced. And you can also see there that we're displaying our ForeFlight web platform. If you were to create on ForeFlight a plan on ForeFlight web, it'll do the same thing. It'll sync to all your devices, which is great. Documents. Under the Documents tab on ForeFlight, you can see that we have a wide variety of documents available. Now, the ones you're just seeing right now are just ones that I've personally imported. And you can send yourself an email and open that document in ForeFlight, and it'll actually save all your PDF files and anything else you might want in there into your Documents tab. So I have things like the flight training manual that I reference pretty often, my own school's checklists, things like that, that you may want to incorporate in your flight department or your flight school, and that might help you out quite a bit. We also, if you tap on the top right-hand corner, we have a catalog. Now, in the catalog, you have a list of FAA, ForeFlight's catalogs, and of course NAV Canada, which is the one that we're mostly worried about. In the NAV Canada catalog, you'll see all the typical things that you're used to having on board and working with. For example, the IFR pilots have the caption to reference. The full CFS is also in there, which is great to have, because if you want to look into those supplementary pages or definition pages of the CFS, you're able to do that, as well as the Aeronautical Information Manual that is updated every cycle, and you'll have the most current one in there. So if whichever ones you'd like, always take a look in the catalog and see which ones are worth downloading and keeping in your documents page. The Canadian Flight Supplement, for example, is fully searchable. So it is a large document, as we all know, and it's annoying to do it when you have the paper version, but on electronically, it's a lot easier. You can search the airport that you're looking and search specific things pertaining to that airport. So you can see there, I quickly searched North Bay, CYBB, and I'm able to flip through the CFS page as if I had the book laying in front of me. The CFS page pertaining to the particular airport will also be included in the Airports tab. So if you were to go under Airports and search North Bay, and there's a small tab there just in the middle, and it's the CFS tab, you're able to get the CFS pages pertaining to that airport. So that's a kind of a quicker way, I find, just to get to that particular airport CFS page. Weight and balance saves you a lot of time, and especially for me as an instructor, I go through a fleet of airplanes, about 25 a day, where I'm flip-flopping between students and airplanes, and this applies for flight departments as well. If you have multiple airplanes and you're switching airplanes constantly, weight and balance is a really quick and easy way to make sure that you are good to go. Now, weight and balance is available in the More tab, and then if you tap weight and balance, you can set up your aircraft profile. Now, you can see here that I've already set several ones that I fly. But the setup is pretty straightforward as long as you have the basic weight and balance information for your aircraft, like moments, CFG, basic empty weight, for example, limitations. You'll be able to set up your own weight and balance profile. Once your weight and balance profile is set up, we see that it's displayed in a nice graphical format. Okay, the graph there should show or should be very similar to what you see in your POH. And on the left-hand side, you can see that there's several values that you can fill in, such as fuel tanks, front seats, back seats, baggage areas, for example. And they're very easily switchable. So if I wasn't flying with full tanks that day, I can easily just tap half tanks and then front seats, back seat passengers, for example, switch their weights. On a flight like this, I might want to enter in-flight fuel consumption. So if I tap on the fuel tanks there, I can input a fuel consumption rate or a ground consumption total. And what that'll do is basically give me a takeoff and a landing weight and balance. So we all know that just because you take off within weight and balance doesn't necessarily mean you're going to land within your CFG. So just something to keep in mind there. And it's a little more interactive than some might think. A really quick and easy way to make sure that you're good to go. ForeFlight offers a wide variety of hazard avoidance tools, and we'll get into some now. Now, for those flying in the east, maybe not too applicable. We don't have too much terrain there, but once you start flying out west, I know a lot of pilots I know, terrain's a big issue. So let's say we're planning a flight from Grand Prairie, Edmonton, and we're going somewhere in Vancouver. And if we were drop down the Navlog page and go to Profile, which is available for Pro subscribers, we generate this profile view of our whole route. It's great to see what kind of obstacles and terrain you're going to encounter on your route in one big snapshot like that. At any point in time there, you can actually pinch and zoom on any of those or inside the actual profile and see in a little more detail of how that terrain is going to be affecting you. At the same time, if you tap and hold anywhere in that profile box, you can generate a specific point of origin that is also displayed in your maps view there. So you can see I'm tapping and holding on a point in my Navlog, my profile view, and I'm seeing it where that exactly is on my map there. The altitude is fully adjustable in the profile view, and you're able to kind of see, okay, well, 8,000 clearly didn't work, so maybe 12 is going to work. So if you slide that up to 12, now you can see you have sufficient clearance en route, and you won't run into any issues. What's also customizable is your corridor of which you see that terrain. So, for example, the standard is about 1 mile, right? But if you don't want to see what's within 1 nautical mile, you want to see what's in more, such as 20 nautical mile corridor width, you can adjust that. Along the same lines, helicopter pilots, for example, might not want to see red and yellow for 100 and 1,000 feet, which is the normal fixed wing hazard altitude advisories. They fly low, and they may not want anything to pop up until they get really low. So that's customizable as well. Just letting you all know that. If we combine the two, if we combine hazard advisor and profile view, we get an image that, well, really tells you a lot. It tells you where the areas of concern are. It gives you a clear picture of where you should and shouldn't go. For example, in this image, probably wouldn't want to divert southeast if I was having engine issues. Probably would choose a safer option, clear of terrain to the west. Another IFR tip for the IFR pilots out there is our amazing feature called Profile View. Now, Profile View is absolutely phenomenal in displaying the departures, arrivals, and approaches to and from airports. For example, let's say we're planning a flight and we have our departure and destination airport in there. If we hit the Procedures tab on the top right-hand corner, we get a procedure preview window that pops up. And the procedure preview window will list all the departures, arrival, and approaches, as well as traffic patterns for the VFR pilots to and from those airports. So let's have a closer look at that. Let's say we're departing from CYQU. It will visually display all the departures available at that airport. So you no longer have to read a list of departures in the cap and figure out, okay, this one's going north, this one's going west. Instead, it just visually does that for you. And it also color codes it, so it's easy to differentiate between the two. Let's say we're doing we're heading southwest, so we're probably going to get the Otepi 2. And if it has any transitions, it'll ask you to select one. You can expect maybe the Yankee X-Ray Sierra transition in this case. If we tap that and add it to our route, that is now previewed in our preview window as a part of our route. And you can build the rest of your route very similarly. So let's go to Arrivals now, into CYYJ, Victoria, and we can expect perhaps the Buick 3 with the YVR transition, and then we can add that to our route. Finally, we're choosing an approach, or at least an expected approach into Victoria. So we can hit approach and get all the available approaches into Victoria. Now, if you'll also notice the very bottom there, it says winds 230 at 4 knots reported 27 minutes ago. that's very handy because, well, if the winds are favoring runway 27 in this case, I'm not really going to be expecting, the RNAV 09, for example. And if you are connected to the internet during your flight, you will receive updated winds and METAR information for you to take a look at. So you can always change your approach, but that's just a little neat feature there. Let's assume that we're using the RNAV Zulu runway 27 today. We select that approach. The approach plate will be overlaid on your map if you are using Canada Pro. That is a Pro feature in ForeFlight. And finally, we select an initial approach fix, add that to our route. And at the end of it all, we get a beautiful IFR flight plan from the departure, the en route portion, the arrival, and the approach right into the airport. So this is absolutely great. You really don't have to start flipping between all these pages, different pages of stars and approaches. You can simply just take a look at what's available and then display it on your map. Now, obviously, there are departure procedures and things you'll have to brief and read over, but you can do that also in the Plates tab. ForeFlight offers a variety of weather layers to pilots, everything from radar to satellite to lightning information, which is very, very useful to give yourself a weather briefing before your flight. I've certainly migrated to using ForeFlight as my primary weather briefer. It does take all the information that you're normally used to looking at on your AWWS website, and it will give you kind of a one-stop shop for taking a look at your weather. Now, although you may be familiar with a lot of weather layers inside ForeFlight, for example, here we have radar displayed along our route, sometimes the issue of the weather or radar layer overlapping the map and obstructing what's underneath it. Now, for example, if you're trying to get information on a particular airport that's obstructed by radar return, that may be an issue, but there is a solution. If you were to go to the settings tab on your maps page, you get a settings bar that at the very bottom reads radar opacity. You have the ability to adjust the opacity of any radar layer in ForeFlight. So if you find that you're getting too much return there and it's obstructing too many things on the map, you can simply just tone down the radar opacity, giving you the ability to read the information on the chart underneath instead of having to turn off and turn on the layer at the same time. We mentioned PAC. PAC is something that I use very often, and that's mostly limited to the limited space I have on my device. Because I'm actually still running a 16 gigabyte iPad, I have to be very cautious of what I download on ForeFlight. And I use the PAC feature. Available when you plan a route and PAC senses that you have something along that route that doesn't necessarily is not downloaded, it will give you a red exclamation mark and a little suitcase icon there saying, hey, there's something here that you might need. Take a look at it. If you were to tap that suitcase, you see what that information is. So from Brampton to North Bay, it's telling me that I need to pack weather, fuel prices, NOTAMs, everything from some IFR high charts or low charts that I might need, terminal procedures, VNC charts. And what PAC essentially does is take a 25 nautical mile radius around your departure and arrival airports and a 25 nautical mile radius corridor within your route and asks itself basically, is this pilot going to need, or is anything along those parameters something that he does not have downloaded? And if even a sliver of a VNC chart goes into that corridor, it will prompt you to download it. Just in case you need to divert, you will have that chart available to you. So it's phenomenal in a way that it does the work for you. You don't have to go through all the VNC charts and say, yeah, I might need that one, I might need that one. Simple hitting the PAC and downloading everything there will save you the hassle. So you can scroll down, you can see it might prompt you to download some documents as well. And once you're ready, you just hit the pack feature, pack button at the bottom there, and you are going to start downloading. Now, a common question is, where do these downloads go? Is there a special pack box? Commonly, we see in the pilot support team, people say, hey, I packed something, how do I delete it? Well, the pack feature works in a way that if you pack something, it doesn't go in a special box. It's simply information that's available to you wherever that information would normally be available. For example, weather and TAFs, METARs, all that. That's all going to be available at the particular airport page and under weather, right? Taxi diagrams, you don't go searching for some special place. It's wherever you would normally access that information, it simply will be available to you. And once the new data cycle comes out, if you have packed something, it will delete that packed data and download the new data. You're packed and ready to fly, which is a good sign. Canadian pilots have the ability to file ICAO flight plans within ForeFlight. Specifically, this ability exists for ICAO IFR flight plans filed within Canada or abroad. You also have the ability to file an ICAO VFR flight plan from the United States to Canada. Now, although ICAO VFR flight plans within Canada are not yet supported, that is something that we are working towards in the future. Let's take a look how we would file a IFR flight plan within Canada. Simply hitting the Send To button on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen gives you the ability to send your route directly to your file and brief page, which will then pre-populate your route in the actual flight plan form. So it's one step that you don't have to enter again. Now, of course, you can enter any information or edit any information you need on the actual flight plan form, such as aircraft information, tail numbers, performance specifications if they have changed directly on that flight plan form. When you've completed that and pilot information, license numbers, you can tap the File button in the bottom right-hand corner and you'll receive a notification that your flight plan is being filed with Lockheed Martin Flight Service and that it has successfully been filed. Now, for more information on filing with ForeFlight, we do have a document available on our Documents tab under Catalog and ForeFlight entitled Filing with ForeFlight. Target lookup. So many of us know that we can display things on the actual maps page, for example, obstacles, but maybe you don't necessarily know that you can actually get more information on what you're seeing. If I were to display the obstacle layer, for example, on our trip to North Bay, I can hit individual targets to get a little more information on them. This is handy, at least I've found in my flying, especially at night. When you're flying along a particular track and you're looking on ForeFlight and it's telling you there's an obstacle in front of you, well, is it lighted? If it isn't, well then I'm not expecting to see a light in front of me. But if it is, what type of lighting does how high it is, so you can cross-reference that with how high you are at the moment. Just to triple check that you're going to be clear of that obstacle, even though you may not necessarily see it. Okay, so that's definitely one that I've caught that makes flying, again, makes you a little more situationally aware and makes flying safer. For those of you who fly in the States and you have, for example, a Stratus that gives you ADS-B traffic information, the target lookup feature works very similar to that. If you were to look up a target or tap on a target, you would get more detailed information on its heading, speed, what type of frequency it's transmitting on, what its altitude is, and, for example, its N number or registration. In-flight changes and reroutes. This is something that I do pretty often because in the Toronto airspace that I fly, it gets pretty crowded, and ATC often tells us to go a certain direction that may not necessarily be a direct route to our point. You can see here we're flying our Brampton to Oshawa leg, and departing Brampton, we've had to go a little north to stay out of Pearson's airspace, and we're heading eastbound now, but not really on a direct track to Oshawa. How can we go direct? Well, if we drop down the nav log there, you can arrow pointing to Oshawa, CYOO. If we tap that arrow, we can get a notification that says, "Hey, do you want to go direct Oshawa?" In this case, yes, we do. And if we tap direct Oshawa, it'll get us a straight line there, and it'll update our nav log so we can just grab a heading off there and go right direct to Ottawa. There's another neat feature that I use pretty often now that I know about it, and the whole purpose of this is to educate everyone on it. For example, let's say I want to get a specific point off of a VOR. You can enter that directly into the edit box of the navlog. So if we take a look here, we have the Simcoe VOR just northeast of our airplane right now. I want to track from the Simcoe VOR on a radial of 230, because that's approximately where we are right now from the VOR. And let's say about 25 DME from that VOR. If we input that into our nav log there, YSO/230/025, that'll actually give us a point on the map. And that point, you can rearrange it so it makes sense. And you can see that once I've rearranged it by simply tapping, holding, and dragging it in our edit box there, we can see that that point has come up on the map screen. Okay, so now we're going straight from 25 DME from the Simcoe VOR direct to Oshawa. Right, and I found that very helpful in training purposes as well, telling students to intercept certain radials at certain distances, and you can kind of cross-check if they're doing it right and track your airplane along the way. Map touch. When ForeFlight displays a chart on the map screen, what it typically does is stitch all the charts together. For example, all the VNC charts are seamlessly stitched together. If you were to zoom out across Canada, you wouldn't really see that the legends or where the maps cut off. This is great. This is what most users want. However, sometimes you run into issues of charts overlapping each other, and some parts are kind of cut off, which poses problems to those airports that are just on that cutoff there. So what we've developed is a feature called Map Touch. If you were to drop down the Settings tab, go to Map Touch Action right at the bottom, you're given three options. No action will continue to stitch all the charts together like they always happen. Bring chart to front and bring chart to front with legends gives you the ability to control what the charts do manually. So let's select bring chart to front with legends, for example. Bring chart to front with legends will, like the name implies, display the legend along with the VNC chart itself. So it's a great way for students or for people who are trying to look up something on the map itself, to take a look at that legend, which tells us so much. We've all kind of wondered what a symbol on a chart is or means, and to have the ability to access that information quickly is great. So bring chart to front with legends will again display the actual VNC chart as if it were laid out on a table in front of you, and it will not switch over to another chart unless you tap on it or on a different area on the map, and then it'll bring up the chart either underneath it or over top of it. So again, we can take a look at what edition we're looking at, if it's up to date, making sure that all that information is correct. Let's say I'm flying in the Toronto area. I know there's a VTA available to me, and if I had no action selected, I would just zoom in and that VTA would come up automatically. But if I have no bring chart to front or bring chart to front with legends selected, that won't happen unless I tap on the screen and manually change that chart. Okay, so this is just a just to let you know type thing where it is available to you. And again, that's just to prevent those stitching scenarios where, or the zooming scenarios where you're changing charts and you don't want it to be. All right, we're going to talk about diversions here for a second. And we've all kind of experienced a scenario where we've planned a route and things haven't really worked out as we expected. What do we do, right? How do we learn from that? And how has ForeFlight made it a little easier? Well, let's say everything's going along great. We're on our route, but we, for whatever reason, have to make the decision to go to another airport, whether it be engine trouble, airplane trouble, passenger, weather along our route. And we have to make a decision as a pilot to go to another airport. In this scenario, I've dropped down the flight category layer on ForeFlight, which basically gives you a quick snapshot of which stations are reporting VFR conditions or marginal VFR or IFR conditions. I can tap on those dots to get a little more information. And I can also select the settings again and get a distance ring around my aircraft. Now, what the distance ring will do is give you a good idea of how far that aircraft, or how far the airport is you want to get to from your current position. In this case, it's telling us it in time based on our ground speed. So based on our current ground speed, it's going to take us about 30 minutes to get to Prince George Airport. Okay, which then you can say to yourself, okay, well, can I afford 30 minutes, or do I have to go somewhere closer? Again, by tapping on the Prince George dot there, you can get current METAR information, saying what the conditions are, and airport information. So if you want to tune in the ATIS, the AWAS, or ground or tower, or if you have other frequencies you wish to, or phone numbers you wish to access, all that information is available to you. One of my favorite features on ForeFlight is the ruler feature, which if you tap 2 fingers directly on your map screen, it will bring up a ruler there, and which will give you a magnetic heading to fly, a distance, approximate time, and fuel burn to that particular airport. So it's a really quick and easy way to figure out, yeah, that'll work, or no, it won't, based on our fuel or our situation. Another way to, or for example, okay, let's say we've decided to go for Prince George as our alternate. Let's get there ASAP. What's the easiest way to do that? Well, we can go drop down the edit navlog there, hit D space, which will give us a current lat long of where we are, and the airport ident, CYXS. And it's just like on a GPS, it's just like going direct to, right? But in this case, we tap D space and our destination. That'll obviously update our plan there, our screen, and we can start heading toward Prince George. Now, let's say we're en route to Prince George, and now we want to set up for an IFR approach because we are flying IFR, and for whatever reason, maybe we can't go into VFR conditions or VMC conditions, or the airport itself is IFR. We can use that procedure tab or procedure preview feature to get an approach into St. George, Prince George. We can select an approach. Again, we're given the best winds available at that airport and what approaches we can expect. And we can select that approach. Now, by this point, we're probably talking to ATC, and they're giving us the ILS runway 15 into Prince George. So we can simply select that, whether it be vectors, or a cool one to show is the DME arc that will display on the actual chart as well. We can add that to our route, and you can see there, there's the DME arc, which is pretty neat, and you'll have your constant position on that arc leading up to your ILS. If you have synthetic vision with ForeFlight, this is what you'll see on your screen if you display that in full screen. So synthetic vision is an absolutely great feature to add on, especially if you're flying in a lot of terrain. Just gives you that extra added security, visual terrain, runway information right in front of you, GPS ground speed, altitude, heading. That's all available to you if you so choose to have it. You can also split screen that with the hazard advisor, and you can see there not only are you getting synthetic vision at the top, but you're getting the DME arc and everything else displayed underneath that. All right, so we've gone to Prince George, we've landed, and we're all safe and sound. The airplane's getting inspected, or the passenger is getting some medical attention if that's the case. We've landed in Prince George. I haven't been there before, so I'm unfamiliar with it. Well, ForeFlight, as you may know, has all the taxi diagrams for the airports, and they are mostly geo-referenced as well. If you see a blue box around any plate, that means it is a geo-reference plate, and that means if you have the Pro version of ForeFlight, you will see your aircraft on that actual aerodrome chart. So we've landed. We can see that we're at runway 27 in this case. At the red banner at the top, if there are any NOTAMs for that particular airport and you have internet connection, you will be given all the NOTAMs applicable to that plate, which is great, because if a taxiway is closed or a runway is closed, you will definitely want to check that. If we were to tap the FBO button on the top left-hand corner of the aerodrome chart, we will display all the FBOs on the field. Not only that, you can actually get a lot more information if you tap on each individual FBO. For example, fuel prices, phone numbers, what amenities they have, what some of the comments other people have left, their experiences. So it is actually a very good way to figure out where you're going on the field. Let's say I'm very unfamiliar with the field and I'm a little overwhelmed in what ground is telling me. You can essentially give yourself progressive taxi instructions. And I've done this very often, especially flying to the United States, is I tap the little pencil icon there, and once you contact ground and they give you taxi instructions, you can essentially draw it out directly on the taxi diagram. Okay, so it's like giving yourself progressive taxi instructions. And in this case, you can change the color, pen type, all that stuff to kind of suit your needs. After you've completed a flight, the track logs feature, which either helps you manually record a flight or does it automatically, that you can set that up yourself, it will record your flight. And we can use that as a tool to kind of either judge a student's progress or a student's flight or debrief ourselves. We can view that track log on the ForeFlight website, as you see there. Basically, it'll come up, it'll just give you a plane map and your actual route of all your stops. This example there is something that I did recently into Muskoka. We can also open that track log in a third-party application. For example, the one I like to use is Google Earth. And what Google Earth will do is actually generate a 3D picture of your whole flight. And that's really great because this is one I did with a student, and we were just doing circuits at an airport. But you can later show that and say, okay, well, we were really tight on the first one, but really wide on the second one. Let's try to make them all really tight in case of engine failure. Or, if you're doing a longer route, is why did my altitude vary? Or, oh, that's the point where we had to divert, and you can see it displayed on the map. Awesome. So other tips and tricks, we're just looking into what other things we can do with ForeFlight and some of the things that we want to let you guys know about. Sharing routes. So if I, for example, make a whole flight plan on my iPad and I want to send it to my student or another that I'm flying with that day, as long as they're on the same Wi-Fi network, I can do that by hitting the Send To button and finding his or her device on there. And basically what they'll get is a
a notification if they want to accept the route, and they've accepted it. You can also send it to a loved one, for example, if you're flying and you're just doing a flight itinerary. You can email it to your responsible person just by selecting the send to and mail button, and it'll basically just send off an email on your route and your leg times and things like that. Ruler profile. So as I mentioned, ruler is a feature that I really like to use, but if you combine it with that profile view, it's really neat, especially if, for example, in this case, you're trying to get around weather. You can measure out weather and take a look at terrain at the same time. So if you have to deviate on that course, you'll see that the profile view works the same way. The instrument panel. The instrument panel is available at the bottom of your screen and activated by that little tachometer at the top of the maps page. You can customize what you see there. Okay, it's not a fixed menu. For example, you can say, I don't want to see next course. I always want to see what nearest airport I have relative, or my relative position to the nearest airport. So you can make those adjustments.
Switching plates, which is another IFR pilot tip, is the ability to have an approach plate overlaid on your maps screen and quickly change it just in case anything changes along your route. So let's say ATC gives you another approach or expecting another approach. You can simply tap on the little gear icon on the top left-hand side of the approach plate, or anywhere on that actual approach plate will bring up this screen, and it'll list all the other approaches available at that airport. Let's say we've switched to the LOC DME runway 27, the ILS is not available. Simply tapping that will bring up the LOC directly on your map screen.
Taking a look at the settings guide, there are some settings that you should know about. For example, in the distance rings, you know I was showing 5, 10, and 30 minutes before. You can actually change it to show distance in nautical miles. Okay, so that's just a feature that you maybe want to be aware of, and you can see that now I'm not showing 30 minutes, I'm showing 50 nautical miles. Extended center lines. You have the ability to extend the center lines of any airport just by going to settings there, and you can see Victoria has several runways, and if you're flying into that airport, it's hard to sometimes visualize exactly what runway is pointing where. So if you extend the center lines from that airport, you can, and you're cleared to a left base 14, it's easier to visualize that. Track vectors, along the same lines, if you go into settings and scroll down to track vectors, you're able to customize how far in advance you see your track vector. So if you want a 30-second track vector, or if you want a 60-second track vector, well, that's up to you, right? And basically it'll display your track in front of your aircraft, and you can kind of see where you're headed. This is kind of a fun one we always like to mention, the current location marker. The current location marker, available under the settings, gives you the ability to maybe not necessarily change to what airplane you're flying, but what airplane you'd like to fly. So if you want to be a fighter pilot that day, hey, ForeFlight says be a fighter pilot. And you can just something to play around with there. And 747s, obviously, even have canards, which is cool. Hazard advisor. The only thing I'll mention here is that you have the ability to change when that hazard advisor is activated. So upon landing, for example, when you're below 30 knots, you will not see all the red and yellow on your map, because the system has assumed that you've landed, and it won't just show you that information. Once hazard advisor is disabled, you'll see a little flag at the bottom of your map screen that's saying it has been disabled.
All right, let's talk about what's new and exciting at ForeFlight, some of the things that we've been working on. As you may have already noticed, we recently, at the end of last year, we released ForeFlight Logbook. And ForeFlight Logbook is a seamless integration into the app. It records flights, performs digital endorsements, you can view your currency summaries, you can export experience reports. You also have the ability to attach photos to your flights, which is a really great social feature. And if you see something great on your flight or you've experienced an unusual event, you can take a picture of it and attach it to your logbook, so you'll always have it for reference, so you can look back on that particular flight. You can add logbook entries manually, just like you would in your paper logbook. What we've done is attach logbook to the track log. So if you record a track log for your flight, it will create a draft logbook entry of which you simply have to edit or add any information. If you currently have a paper logbook or an electronic logbook, ForeFlight makes it easy to import that into ForeFlight Logbook. By going to www.plan.foreflight.com and clicking on our logbook link, you'll have more information there. Through ForeFlight Connects program, which we are constantly expanding, ForeFlight has the ability to connect to flight simulators, portable receivers, and installed avionics, just to make flying a little bit more enjoyable and productive. Products such as Stratus, Garmin, which provides two-way flight plan transfer and ADS-B, Dynon Avionics and Avidyne are partners of ours. Free Flight Systems, which provides ADS-B solutions, Bad Elf for GPS solutions, and then a variety of other avionics and flight simulators. The great thing about flight simulators is if you have, for example, Microsoft Flight Sim at home, you're able to connect ForeFlight directly to that and have the ability to fly at home on bad weather days, maybe practice some instrument procedures with ForeFlight in hand. ForeFlight is not something you should be exactly learning in the air, and I often encourage my students to take a look at it on the ground, and if they have a flight simulator, to connect it. Let's talk a little bit about pricing and support. Some common questions are: what type of plans do you offer for VFR or IFR pilots, or for Canadian and US pilots? Well, we make it easy. We have a Basic Plus and a Pro Plus plan. Both include both IFR and VFR data, but there are minor differences between the two. So I encourage you to read that and look them through and see what fits your flying. Each plan comes with one geographic region, US or Canada, and you can add the other for another $100 a year. If you are new to ForeFlight, I strongly encourage you to download the application because you will be given a 30-day trial. During that 30 days, you can test flight the app and go flying with it. Tell us what you like and what you don't like before you commit to a yearly subscription. Some ways to learn more. Well, we offer a pretty comprehensive pilot's guide that's available both online and through the application. We have lots of videos through foreflight.com/videos, and we release the latest news and information on blog.foreflight.com as well. We have a monthly newsletter that if you're not already signed up for, please do. Send us an email and we'll get you signed up for that. You can also sign up on any page of our website. Just a reminder, our pilot support team, is on frequency 7 days a week. We are real people, real pilots ready to help. We understand many of the issues everyone is having. Or if you want to just provide some feedback on what we can be doing better, we'll be happy to take that. On behalf of myself and everyone here at ForeFlight, I want to thank you and see you again soon.